We begin tonight with the president's own accusations of encouraging white supremacists and the continued backlash over Donald Trump's divisive and inflammatory rhetoric leading up to the deadliest attack targeting Latinos in recent U.S. history. The El Paso shooter's manifesto referenced Trump's language, saying his attack was, quote, response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. And in an affidavit filed today, the New York Times reports that the shooter divulged to the police that his target was Mexicans. The very same people that President Trump slandered the day he announced his campaign for president in this video here. A USA Today analysis of the rallies Trump has held since 2017 found that Trump has used the words predator, invasion, alien, killer, criminal, and animal at his rallies while discussing immigration more than 500 times. The Trump administration isn't treating those people any better. The administration is accused of intentionally separating children from their parents at the border and caging them in overcrowded detentions, sleeping on concrete floors with insufficient food or showers. Today, child welfare services are grappling with caring for children who were left stranded after ICE arrested nearly 700 undocumented workers in Mississippi on Wednesday, the largest raid in a single state in U.S. history. Roughly 300 of those people are still being detained. BuzzFeed reported that hundreds of children across Mississippi missed school yesterday because they were afraid to leave their homes. School and welfare agencies were not alerted about the raids because it could have botched the operation, ICE officials told NBC News. As one ICE official said, quote, we're a law enforcement agency, not a social services agency. One worker who witnessed the raid said, I'm thinking of the separated families, fathers and mothers deported, children left alone because their parents were arrested. What I saw was traumatic, painful. Well, traumatic and painful, but the cruelty is the point. Today, Donald Trump was asked specifically about this lack of preparation.
Why wasn't there a better plan in place to deal with the migrant children in Mississippi?
The reason is because you have to go in, you can't let anybody know, otherwise when you get there, nobody will be there. But I want people to know that if they come into the United States illegally, they're getting out, they're going to be brought out. And this serves as a very good deterrent.
A very good deterrent. The Atlantic's Adam Serwer says that the real deterrent is exactly the cruel conditions that immigrants and asylum seekers face at the border under President Trump. In his piece entitled from last year entitled "The Cruelty is the Point," Serwer writes, Trump's only true skill is the con. His only fundamental belief is that the United States is the birthright of straight, white Christian men, and his only real authentic pleasure is in cruelty. It is that cruelty and the delight it brings them that binds his most ardent supporters to him in shared scorn for those they hate and fear. But Donald Trump's immigration policy is causing pain on the other side of the border as well. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry crossed the border to see how Mexico is handling the overflow of migrants and those deported from the United States, and joins us live from Mexico City. Good evening, Cal.
Hey, good evening, Ali. As you said, this administration is changing immigration and asylum in America. They're changing what it means to be an immigrant in America. But as we found out, these policies have a wide-ranging impact. They go beyond America's borders, in this case, all the way to Mexico's border with Guatemala.
In Tapachula, Mexico, most people are from somewhere else, and everybody has a story.
Did you think about going to the U.S.?
No.
No. Why not?
Because I got deported already.
What is it like here in Tapachula?
It's like I don't know if it's bad for the expression, but it's not good.
Right now, the situation in America is very difficult for illegal immigrants.
President Trump isn't just affecting the lives of migrants, he's shifting policy inside Mexico. His tune on the country has recently, not so subtly, shifted.
I want to thank, by the way, the country of Mexico. They've got 21,000 soldiers on the border right now. I'm starting to like Mexico a lot.
This is the new reality for the Mexican government. Ever since President Trump threatened this country with tariffs, 11,000 new National Guardsmen have been stood up along the border with Guatemala. For the commander here and his personnel, the mission is as tenuous as the politics.
Nuestra función es dar seguridad y resguardar la actuación del agente de migración.
For security reasons, the military insisted we conceal his identity.
What's the stated mission of the soldiers who've been stood up here on the border?
Nosotros no podemos golpear, no podemos sujetar, no podemos perseguir al migrante.
Traveling back and forth between Mexico and Guatemala has been a part of daily life and commerce for centuries. It's only in the era of President Trump that you now officially need an ID when reaching the Mexican side of the river.
That show of force along the border with Guatemala is only half the story. The Mexican government is setting up centers like this one in an attempt to get migrants to register. It's their way of trying to bring some semblance of order in what is very clearly a chaotic situation.
People from all over the world queue up and jockey for position by the gates that seem to swing open at random. Authorities, both eager to get people into the system and at the same time are overwhelmed by the volume of human traffic. All the while, people are stuck here, many after a treacherous journey, afraid still to show their faces, fearing it'll hurt their chances of eventually making it to the United States. As night falls on this border town, we meet Ishmael. His parents brought him to California when he was only 3 years old. Recently deported, he's trying to get back to the only life and family he knows.
Are you trying to get back?
I am trying to get back.
How are you?
Either legally or, if possible, illegal. Yeah.
So you would cross back illegally if you had to?
Yes, definitely. Just to be back with my family.
Ali, Ishmael told us he feels like a foreigner living in Mexico, that he'll do whatever it takes to get back to his family in California, even if he dies trying to cross illegally. Look, as you said, these policies are advertised as deterrents. In many ways they are, but the cost of that is human suffering. People in detention, people who've been separated from their families, deportations, or in this case, people stuck at international borders, unable to move in either direction. Ali?
All right, Cal, stay with us. I want to bring in Stephanie Valencia. She's on the advisory board of the Latino Victory Fund and is co-founder of Equus Labs, and Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and an MSNBC legal analyst. She wrote a new piece about her experiences as a prosecutor with ICE. Welcome to both of you. Stephanie, you and I spoke earlier this week. I want to get your take. It's been a remarkable week for Latinos, Hispanics in America, both with the killings from last weekend, the targeted killings, then with the ICE roundup in Mississippi. You said to me last week that things have changed. People are becoming aware of the fact that this targeting now has a price.
Absolutely. And trust me, Ali, there are many more places I'd rather be on a Friday night than talking about the kind of attacks on the Hispanic and immigrant communities that have happened over the last week and, quite frankly, over the last several years. I think what was clear from Cal's piece is that, you know, the slash and burn approach to Trump's immigration policy is not solving the root causes of migration. People are coming to this country because they are fleeing violence and persecution, and they come here to seek a better lives and more safety for themselves and their families. And in addition to that, we have an economy, as we saw earlier this week with the Mississippi immigration raids, an economy that relies on immigrant labor. And we cannot be hypocrites as American citizens here, including Donald Trump, who the Washington Post again revealed earlier today in a piece, had the reliance of immigrant labor at his hotels. And so we as a country need to understand that our economy ultimately does rely on immigrant labor, and that, you know, people who are literally putting food on our table, chicken that many of you probably had in chicken salads earlier this week, were people that were separated from their families, whether it's DACA, large-scale immigration raids targeting workers but not employers, whether it is kids in cages at the border, or rounding up and starting to detain U.S. citizens, which has happened multiple times under the Trump administration. The slash and burn policy is not working, and there is only one thing to think, is that, you know, ultimately he is going after the Hispanic and immigrant community. Obviously, the messages that he's sending is resulting in acts of violence on our community in places like El Paso. And so we have to put a stop to it, and we have to stand up. And what we've seen in the last week is we've seen lots of leaders, hundreds of leaders signed on to our op-ed that ran in the Washington Post earlier this week. But people are fed up and people are awake.
And you were one of the authors of that op-ed. Joyce, let's talk about when President Trump became president and John Kelly was his Homeland Security Secretary. They talked about the fact that if you were not a serious criminal or a criminal, you were not going to be targeted for deportation. His elegant term for it was bad hombres. But they were talking about the kind of people who are a threat to society, a menace to society. In fact, to Stephanie's point, many of the people who we have reported on, who have been targeted for immigration action and deportation have been people who have been working in the United States 5, 10, 15, 20. We know of instances of 25, 30 years, including some of these people who were arrested in Mississippi. Tell me about how we're supposed to think about these ICE raids, because you were a prosecutor who had jurisdiction over some of these things.
So the way you think about this sort of a situation as a prosecutor is it's important to prosecute the most culpable people and the people who represent the greatest threat to your community. In a situation like this, that would mean seeing if you can prosecute the employers, who after all are the ones who are employing all of these people illegally. And also, if you're going to look at people who are in the country without legal immigration status, you want to focus on removing those who are violent, those who are engaged in criminal activity. Both of those items should be the priorities. But this week we saw law enforcement go after, you know, what prosecutors would call low-hanging fruit, going into a workplace and arresting people who are at their jobs.
And Stephanie, I want to play, people have maybe seen this before, but I think it's important to play a little bit of the sound of an 11-year-old girl whose father was taken in the ICE raids in Mississippi. And I want to talk to you on the other side about this.
Governments, please put your heart. Let my parent be free with everybody else, please. Don't leave the child with cryness and everything. I need my dad for me. My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal.
Stephanie, those images, that girl tells us a story that we have been covering for the last more than the last year, about a line we cross when it comes to humanity, right? That girl, her father was arrested, but we have seen children who have been detained. We have seen children detained at a cost to taxpayers that would be higher than spending a night in a Four Seasons hotel, who don't get clothes and who don't get toothpaste and who don't get showers. This is more than about immigration. This becomes about our humanity.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is, and that little girl's voice has kept me up at night all week since the Mississippi raid happened. And for people who aren't shaken to their core by hearing that and hearing the fear and sadness in her voice, because she does not know the next time she is going to see her father, and was picked up on the first day of school for her, which should be a joyful and happy day for a kid her age. You know, this is a call to conscience for all Americans. Like, are we okay as United States citizens with the way that we are treating people like that, who again who are part of our communities, who are putting food on our table, who are doing backbreaking work in our country? Are we okay with how they are being treated? And I think this is a call to conscience. I think the images that we see of children being separated from their parents, of kids in physical cages, you know, it really is awakening a set of people beyond just the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community community and the immigrant community in this country feels very much under attack. But I think that because of what we are seeing and what we are hearing every single day now, I think a broader set of people are becoming aware and they're angry about it. And I do think that this is also a wake-up call for Republicans to step up and be a call to conscience, and really speak and work with their conscience. I think, as Joyce said, we should really be thinking about how we create an immigration system that works to put a pathway to, put many of these folks on a pathway to citizenship, but to also focus our enforcement resources where they matter most, which is getting, the scariest criminals out of our country. But I think ultimately this is a time for us to rethink what immigration in this country should be moving
those two
forward.
things are not mutually exclusive, right? You can keep those hardworking people who are in this country here, Cal, and you can completely put your enforcement efforts behind people who are conducting, criminality and behavior that is unsafe for Americans. Cal?
Right, and listen, don't forget, 300 of the 640 people that were swept up in those raids were Americans, right? I think Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, and I think we need to say that name, Stephen Miller, are changing the fabric of what it means to be American and what it means for America. The thing about traveling around the world and reporting and then returning home to America is that America is the place that protects people. America is the safe place that people can come, that they can apply for asylum when they've reached America and they're on American soil. And what's happening now is they're going into detention facilities. We're putting kids in cages. We're separating families. We're deporting people, including Americans. And it's not only changed the fabric of America, but it's changed how the world is looking at the United States of America. People here in Mexico are afraid. On the front pages of the papers, there was quotes from this gunman that said, "I was trying to shoot as many Mexicans as I could, and we didn't hear anything from the President of the United States for 48 hours. People here noticed that, and they're talking about it, Ali.
Joyce, Brett Stevens, conservative, has written in the New York Times that the right's attempt to downplay the specifically ideological context of the El Paso massacre is a transparently self-serving effort to absolve this president of moral responsibility for his damaging rhetoric. This, too, shouldn't wash. The president is guilty in a broad sense of a form of incitement. To Stephanie's point, that this is as clear an opportunity as one gets for Republicans to be able to say, this isn't America. This is a bridge too far. But that doesn't seem to move this president.
It really doesn't, Allie. And if this president wanted to disassociate himself with that sort of racist sentiment, he could very clearly take to Twitter or do an interview and say, I don't want anyone to harm Mexicans, whether these people are legally in our country or not. American citizens of Hispanic origin. No one should use violence against other people. And I think it's remarkable that from Charlottesville on, we've not seen this president make any sort of statement like that at any point in time. Every Republican elected official needs to be asked if they believe, if they continue to stand with the president, or how they view the need for violence in this society.
Joyce Vance, Stephanie Valencia, Cal Perry, thank you all for your contribution to understanding this very troubling issue.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.